Hey guys, this is Sports for God 83 from the GoFast e-racing series, and this is episode 4 of the GoFast interview. And today we've got Rowdy Fan 1851. He's kind of a longtime member of the league, and he's jumped in to spend some time with us. Rowdy, thanks for coming in and chatting with me, man.
Yeah, no problem. You're welcome.
So listen, man, I want to definitely at some point in the interview talk a little bit about your podcast, but honestly, let's kind of start from the beginning. So what got you into NASCAR? How old were you? Just tell me the story about you and your connection with the sport.
So, I had an old family friend who really got me into NASCAR, and I believe the first really memory I have of watching a race, I think maybe 2005. And I saw that, famous Jeff Gordon paint team, and I was like, oh well, that's gonna be my favorite driver, like always. Like a lot of fans you hear. But my first real NASCAR memory was the end of 2005 when you saw Greg Biffle and Matt Kenseth. No, Greg Biffle and Mark Martin racing for the win at Homestead. And but after that, my first race was a Truck Series race at Kansas. My first, Xfinity and Cup race were at Charlotte. My favorite has to be the 2014 Fall Texas race I went to, where Jeff Gordon and Brad Keselowski got into it. I think that has to be my favorite weekend memory.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I actually remember that race. It was a good one. So, clearly I don't really need to ask about your gamer tag. Obviously you're a big Kyle Busch fan. So, I'll just ask you what many people might ask you. Why Kyle Busch?
All growing up, even before watching racing, my nickname was always Rowdy. I don't quite know why, but it's just because I probably was just a wild child. But and then when I heard Rowdy in NASCAR, I was like, maybe he's the guy I need to start rooting for, because he's not afraid to speak. He speaks his mind, and I like to speak my mind. So that's kind of the reason why I got drawn to him, and the M&Ms and stuff like that wasn't a hard decision either.
So we've talked a little bit about real NASCAR, but let's kind of shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about NASCAR gaming. So obviously there's an introduction to that, and what was your first game? What was your first experience, and kind of what got you into to online racing and NASCAR gaming in general?
I think my answer may even surprise you. I remember playing those like late NASCAR games in the late 1990s, like the 1998 NASCAR game. I remember playing that, especially at my grandparents'. But I really think the game that really got me hooked was the 2006 game by EA Sports. Me and my brothers would play that 24/7.
So what about other parts of the game? Like, do you get into the paint scheme stuff? I know that was kind of a big thing during the Eutechnics era. Did you do a lot of that?
Yeah. I really think I did a lot of paint schemes up until really the NASCAR Heat Series, but I would spend hours and hours just creating paint schemes and racing them and having fun with that. Trying to maybe create the best paint scheme between my brothers and I, and trying to show my parents, and they aren't really NASCAR fans, but they want to be just because of me. So they were like, "Oh yeah, that's cool."
So you would consider, as a kind of a big fan of NASCAR history, you got a little extra hobby about that? I mean, is there something that you do specifically, or just do you read up a lot on it, or what?
I mean, I'm not afraid to admit it, but between high school and really having my first full-time job, I watched a lot of NASCAR documentaries, and now that the Dale Jr. download is pretty much about history, it, it's something that just intrigues me to see some of that stuff that they went through in the 60s, 50s, and you know, see those cars that they raced in, and seeing how far along we have gotten in the last 50 years, especially even like the last 20 years, where these cars are like so much safer than they were 20 years ago. Like, could you like imagine some of these some of these hits that we've had, 2 years ago in the Daytona 500? Ryan Newman 20 years ago probably wouldn't have walked away from that wreck. The history, I like to go on NASCAR reference all the time and just look up random stuff. So that's one of the things, major things I'm into NASCAR now.
Okay, well, I'm not afraid to admit this to you, and I guess maybe to anybody else watching this, but I actually do have a lot of notes in a 3-ring binder. I've got the pole winner, the race winner, and all of that for pretty much every race dating back to like the early 90s. So I'm a little bit of a nerd in that way myself, so I think we could probably understand each other that way. Okay, Rowdy, as promised, I'd like to get some details about your podcast, Beyond the Marbles. I know that it's a new partner for the GoFast Racing Series this year, which is really exciting for a lot of the guys in the series. But why don't you tell me about the origins of that and just basically the story of this podcast?
I kind of wanted it to be a lot about history and a lot about going on right now, and some of the differences between now and maybe 30 years ago. So it's a mixture of everything. One week we could be talking about NASCAR. The next week we could be talking about F1. It's not really just about NASCAR. It's really about all motorsports, to be quite honest.
Okay, cool. Now, is this podcast something that you do with other people? Is this like a solo thing? I mean, what is the logistics behind the podcast itself?
Well, right now having time to do it, but mostly, I mean, I would like to have somebody else do it with me.
Yeah, so you're thinking maybe as it continues to grow that maybe you have like guest hosts or guest co-hosts, or maybe find a partner down the road that you can hang out with, like maybe on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, that would be definitely the ideal situation, because like I said, people want to hear more than just one voice in a podcast, like the Dale Jr. downloads, like Door Bumper Clear. They want to have opinions instead of just one opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you bounce ideas off of each other, and it just makes for better conversation overall. So yeah, I'll certainly get that.
And then talking about the future, I would like to be able to do maybe podcast on location, kind of the stuff that David Land is doing on YouTube right now, and that's kind of the big dream for me, is to be able to go to these races and make content, be at those races and events where I can video, because one of the things I like to do is video and take pictures, so that's going to be helpful, especially for the YouTube side of it.
Cool. So kind of in connection with the podcast, Beyond the Marbles, you've made the decision, this season to partner with the GoFast Racing Series and kind of throw some sponsorship. Tell us a little bit about what led to that decision, and what that looks like for you this season and maybe down the road.
It wasn't very hard a decision, really. I wanted to grow a league. the leagues I've had in the past weren't, really didn't really have the structure that I was looking for. And when I joined this league 2 years ago, it showed promise, and so I wanted to invest into the league to where, you know, it's not just this year. It's looking for, now and, a year or two down the road is where.
Well, I can tell you that, I certainly appreciate it. I know a lot of the guys in the league appreciate it. Kind of, I would say that it sort of legitimizes us a little bit, that, there's really something to fight for at times. And I know that, definitely when you think about some of the incentives that you have for this season, like the Triple Crown event that you're doing with some of the sponsorship, is really, really cool. It gives guys a little something extra to get excited about, and it's certainly, like I said, I think it adds a little legitimacy to our series, and it's been a lot of fun, talking to you about it and putting it together and getting it ready for this season. And I think the guys are pretty excited about it. So it's pretty awesome to have that kind of addition as we enter under our fourth season. So that's really cool. So honestly, man, as we get into this season, let's switch gears to Rowdy Fan as a racer. So, you scored your first two victories last season. You finished second in the points, so you started making some real noise, and you kind of turned the corner in that sense. You're looking pretty fast, man. You look like you're looking pretty good for this season. You showed some speed at Daytona. It looks like a different Rowdy out there. So how are you feeling about the 2022 season, and what are you looking to accomplish this year?
I think anything less than 2 wins would probably be a disappointment for me. I think the with a little bit more competition starting this year than the end of last year, I think is going to be a little bit more difficult. But there are a couple of racetracks like Bristol and some of those racetracks where I know I'm really good at, to where I can circle on those dates and say, hey, I can win here. And I think a big goal for me this year is making the playoffs, winning at least 2 or 3 races, and battling for that championship at the end of the year. I think one of the biggest things is for me is making one of the stats this year. I think that's one of the things that I want to make sure is seeing my name in one of those stats this year. So that's another big goal for me this year.
So now, are you a guy who likes to practice a lot? Do you spend a lot of time away from the online, kind of getting yourself ready for each race, or did you spend a lot of time during the off season, or are you a guy that just tries to just show up on Tuesday night and try to figure it out and work your way through each event?
Well, I've done a little bit of both, where I just show up and race, but I try and practice a little bit nowadays, and work on where I should be lifting, where I shouldn't be lifting, and stuff like that. So I feel like it's been helping, where I can get maybe 15-20 minutes of practice, where it's not like hours on end, to where you practice yourself out, and you're just practice so much that at the end of the race you're like where I used to be.
Well, Rowdy, thanks, man, for jumping on and spending a little time chatting with me. It's kind of neat to get to know you a little more. I think the other guys will like it too. So appreciate you jumping on and answering some questions and having a good conversation.
Yeah, you could probably check the podcast on any podcast from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for throwing that out there. I forgot to ask where people can find the podcast, so thanks for doing my job for me there. So, but yeah, appreciate you coming on, and be looking forward to racing with you this year. And also thanks again for the sponsorship ad to the series, and So it looks to be a fun year, and it looks to be fun to have you around in it.